Most people wearing a crucifix right now have absolutely no idea what they're carrying. They put it on in the morning the same way they put on a watch. It matches the outfit. It looks good. Maybe it was a gift. Maybe it's just habit. And they walk out the door without a second thought. And here's the thing. Padre Pio saw that. He literally saw it. Not as a metaphor. Not as a feeling. He saw what was happening spiritually when someone treated a crucifix like a piece of jewelry. And what he saw disturbed him enough to act on it. Publicly, directly, sometimes harshly. That's what we're getting into today. If you already know who Padre Pio is, bear with me for 60 seconds, because this context is what makes everything else hit differently. Padre Pio of Pietrelcina was an Italian Franciscan friar who bore the stigmata, the 5 wounds of Christ, for 50 years. 50 years of bleeding from his hands, feet, and side. The wounds were examined repeatedly by doctors and church officials. No natural explanation was ever confirmed, but the stigmata was almost secondary to something else. The man had an extraordinary ability to read souls. People would come to him for confession, and he would tell them sins they had never confessed, sins they had forgotten, sins they were hiding, sins they hadn't even admitted to themselves. Countless documented accounts. Cardinals, bishops, ordinary people, all of them walked out of that confessional shaken. He also bilocated. He was documented in 2 places at the same time. He was reportedly seen in the skies over San Giovanni Rotondo during a World War II bombing run. Pilots reported seeing a friar in the clouds, and they turned back. The bombing never happened. This is who we're talking about. Not a pious old man with a gentle disposition, a man whose spiritual perception was, by all accounts, something categorically different from normal human awareness. So when Padre Pio looked at someone wearing a crucifix, he didn't just see a piece of metal. He saw what it meant and what it didn't mean. There are multiple documented and widely reported accounts of Padre Pio reacting to crucifixes being worn carelessly or irreverently. These aren't legends. They come from the testimonies of people who were there, collected by those who documented his life. The first thing you need to understand is that he could tell the difference immediately, without being told. He didn't need context. Someone would walk into his presence and he would know, not just whether they were in a state of grace, but how they related to the sacred objects they were carrying. There are accounts of Padre Pio becoming visibly uncomfortable or outright refusing to engage warmly with individuals who wore crucifixes or religious medals as fashion. He wouldn't condemn them in front of crowds, but those who knew him well said you could see it in him, a withdrawal, a seriousness that wasn't there a moment before. In one case, a woman came to him wearing a beautiful gold crucifix, expensive, prominent, clearly a centerpiece of her outfit. She expected warmth. What she got instead was a direct question. Did she pray with it? Did she treat it as sacred? When she admitted she mostly wore it because it was pretty, his response wasn't angry. It was grave. He told her she was carrying the image of Christ's suffering as decoration, and that she should think very carefully about what that meant. She reportedly left that encounter a different person. Then there are the stronger cases. People who weren't just indifferent to their crucifixes, but who wore them while living in open contradiction to what they represented. People in serious, unrepented sin, walking around with the cross around their neck like a talisman, like it would protect them without any conversion of heart. Padre Pio didn't play along with that. He would not pretend not to see it. And those who witnessed his interactions with such people described a firmness in him that was almost alarming. Not cruelty, but the kind of seriousness a doctor has when he tells you the diagnosis is bad and you need to act now. One of the most striking types of accounts involves people who came to him with crucifixes they wanted blessed, and he would pause, hold the object, and sometimes give it back without blessing it. When pressed, he would indicate that the person needed to deal with something in their own soul before the object could be treated as truly sacred in their hands. That's not a small thing. That's a man operating with a level of spiritual discernment that most of us can't fully comprehend, and taking it seriously enough to act on it even when it made people uncomfortable. Here's where it's worth pausing for a moment, because there's a real theological foundation to everything Padre Pio was doing, and understanding it changes how you see all of this. The Catholic Church distinguishes between 2 categories of sacred objects. There are sacraments, the 7 major channels of grace: baptism, Eucharist, confession, and so on. And then there are sacramentals, objects and actions that the Church has set apart for sacred use. Crucifixes, rosaries, holy water, scapulars, these are sacramentals. The Church is very clear on what a sacramental is and isn't. It is not magic. It does not operate automatically regardless of the disposition of the person carrying it. A sacramental's efficacy, its spiritual effect, is connected to the faith and the intention behind it. The Catechism itself states that sacramentals prepare us to receive grace and dispose us to cooperate with it. They are not shortcuts around interior conversion. This is the theological reality Padre Pio was operating from. When he looked at someone wearing a crucifix without reverence, he wasn't just seeing rudeness. He was seeing a person who had taken something set apart for sacred purposes and reduced it to an accessory, and in doing so, had closed off the very spiritual benefit the object was meant to open. There is also something more serious underneath this. The crucifix is not just any religious symbol. It is the image of God's Son in the moment of his greatest suffering, dying for the sins of humanity. To wear that image as a fashion statement with no awareness of what it represents is something the saints took very seriously. Not because God is easily offended, but because the person doing it is showing you exactly where their heart is. Padre Pio isn't here anymore. He died in 1968. But the spiritual reality he was responding to hasn't changed. The crucifix around your neck right now, if you're wearing one, is either one of the most powerful objects you own or it's just metal. And the difference between those two things isn't the object, it's you. He saw that every time, without fail. So the question isn't really about Padre Pio. It's not about the theology. It's much simpler than that. The next time you put on a crucifix, what is it to you? Because if you don't have an answer to that, you might want to find one before you put it on again.